Revenge films.
My name is Jessica. I live with my husband Kevin, and I'm a full-time housewife. We live in a house that's pretty close to Kevin's parents' house, and on the weekends or on the holidays, his parents often come over to our house to eat with us. 2 years ago, my father-in-law became ill, and the lower half of his body became paralyzed. His recovery has been a tough road, but through his hard work, these days, he's finally been able to regain a somewhat normal life. However, my mother-in-law, on the other hand, had always had a pretty self-centered personality. She didn't really support her husband, and she continued to live her life for herself only. Because of that, my husband and I discussed living together with his parents, but both of his parents' house and the apartment that we lived in were both quite small, so we couldn't figure out a way to make it work. I was worried about my father-in-law, who had become paralyzed from the waist down, and tried to do whatever I could to support him. In turn, my father-in-law seemed to really like me, and every single time that I would see him, he would thank me for my help. And perhaps his wife didn't appreciate that, because one day out of nowhere, my mother-in-law started to completely ignore me. It all began one day when my in-laws came over to our place over the weekend to visit us.
Jessica and I were thinking that today we can order sushi for delivery. I'm sorry that you guys are always having to take care of us. Well, Jessica was saying that we don't get to eat sushi very often, so we might as well do it when we're together. Jessica, you're far too kind, thank you!
This is nothing, don't mention it. I'm also always taking care of you and looking after you, but don't you think it's way too ridiculous that you're only thanking your daughter-in-law? What about me?
I thank you every day, Karen, don't I?
But it's obvious that your attitude is completely different when you're talking to Jessica.
What are you being so bitter about? This is silly. Jessica, please don't pay any mind to that.
Okay. And first of all, Jessica, what exactly are you trying to do? Always trying to suck up to my husband and get on his good side. What are you hiding? Not at all. I wasn't trying to suck up to him at all or hide anything like that.
Hey, Mom! What are you saying? Jessica was just worried about Dad, and she's done a lot to help him, so don't say it like that!
Oh, come on. Why is everybody taking her side? Ever since my mother-in-law started to completely ignore my presence, even if I spoke directly to her, she would ignore me. Even if the whole family was having a conversation, she was clearly ignoring me. In the end, I wasn't able to have a single conversation with my mother-in-law that day, and Kevin's parents went home. Even the following weekend, when we came over, this behavior continued. It became the norm for her to treat me like I was the only one that didn't exist. It was really starting to get to me. As this continued, I started to dread the days that my in-laws would come over because I didn't want to see my mother-in-law and be treated like this. At that time, I was still trying to think of a way that I might be able to get back on her good side, so that we could make up and get along again. I was thinking next weekend, maybe we could go out to eat somewhere. Maybe the restaurants nearby?
That's a great idea! We don't go out very often. Why don't we do that? You've always liked that restaurant too, right, Jessica?
Yeah, that makes me really happy that we all get to go together. Let's enjoy it, the three of us, as family, without anyone else to get in our way. The three of you? I'll go ahead and make the reservation for 3 next weekend.
What do you mean for 3?
Well, it's obvious, isn't it? For me, you, and your dad.
Hey, Mom! That's enough already! Cut it out! Ever since a few weeks ago, you've been ignoring Jessica or purposely excluding her from everything! What are you trying to do? That's right. We've all noticed, and it's immature.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not ignoring her. I just made a mistake and counted the wrong number of people, that's all. My husband and his father saw right through her, and even though they tried to lecture her, my mother-in-law kept playing dumb and refused to acknowledge it. Even though they both tried to talk to her, it would all go in one ear and out the other. And even after that, she continued to turn her back to me. That was when my husband and his father came up with an idea. They said that the next time they come over, we would all ignore my mother-in-law instead, and so the next weekend, when my in-laws came over to our house, we decided to put our plan into action and everybody ignored Kevin's mother.
I brought some gifts today! Jessica, you love cream puffs, don't you?
I love them, thank you so much.
Wow, looks delicious. The 3 of us can enjoy them.
Let me go pour some tea. I came back with only 3 cups of tea for everybody except my mother-in-law. When she saw that, her face went sour, and then as we started to have a conversation, every single time she would join, the 3 of us would completely ignore her and continued on like she didn't exist. Perhaps my mother-in-law realized that she was being ignored, and on a very rare occasion, for the first time in weeks, she spoke to me. However, I did exactly what she had been doing to me all this time, and I continued to ignore her entirely. But then suddenly, my mother-in-law started crying. This is awful! Are you all enjoying this that much? Bullying me?
My goodness. Now do you finally understand how Jessica felt?
Miss Karen, you were always doing the exact same thing to me for weeks now. What is this, revenge? Whatever, I've had enough. I'm leaving. My mother-in-law threw a tantrum, and with tears in her eyes, she stormed out of the door. My father-in-law, husband, and myself were left in the living room, and we were sure that with this, she got a taste of her own medicine. My father-in-law promised us that when he went home that day, he was going to speak to his wife and make sure that she understands what she had been doing and that she apologizes. However, we got a phone call from him later that night, and according to him, his wife never acknowledged that she was ignoring me. Instead, she said that I was playing the victim and over-exaggerating, and because of me, she ended up bullied by the entire family. She was in a terrible mood, and my father-in-law ended up having to be yelled at by her instead. I felt really bad that because of me, my father-in-law had to go through that, and that it was causing him trouble. Not only that, but apparently my mother-in-law was now angry that because of me, she and her husband weren't getting along anymore. And I started to get a barrage of angry messages from her. "Because of you, my family is falling apart, and my life is a disaster. Even if you try to apologize, I'll never forgive you." When I received these messages, I showed them straight to my husband. He told me that I can ignore them, so I decided to just leave them on read and not respond. Even though I was completely ignoring every message regardless of that, I received multiple messages from my mother-in-law every single day. And then a few days later, one day, as I was continuing to ignore the messages from my mother-in-law, I felt a lot less stressed because I didn't have to deal with it, and I could feel the weight of my shoulders getting lighter and lighter. That being said, I did think that someday we'd need to properly talk about it so that we can make up and the family could all get along again. Just as I was thinking that, somebody rang the doorbell and then continued to ring it incessantly. I was wondering who on earth it could be. When I looked at the security monitor screen, my mother-in-law was glaring directly into the camera lens. Because her anger had clearly not subsided, I didn't want to see her at all, so I ignored it. But then I heard a booming voice yelling in the hallway outside of my door. "Open up, Jessica! How long are you planning on ignoring me? I gave birth to your husband, you know, you ungrateful brat!" "Miss Karen, please stop. You're gonna disturb the neighbors, so please." "I'm not going to leave until you apologize. I can't believe you would belittle your own mother-in-law like this. I'm never going to forgive you." This was getting out of hand and I was starting to get scared, so I called my husband and I let him hear his mother's yelling voice through the phone. Kevin said that he would wrap up his work and run over as fast as he could. For a moment I was relieved, but then it suddenly went silent outside the door. I thought that maybe she gave up and went home. But when I cracked the door open, I saw smoke coming from the ground. When I followed the smoke with my eyes, what, a fire? To my disbelief, my mother-in-law had lit a match and thrown the match and fire onto our mailbox. All of the mail in there caught on fire, and there was a huge flame spreading in the front of my front door. Even I wanted to run away because there was a massive fire spreading right in front of the door. I wasn't able to get through the fire to escape. In a panic, I grabbed the hose from inside the house and began to throw the water on it. Seeing the blazing fire right in front of my eyes, I was filled with fear, but my shaking hands desperately tried to put out the fire. Eventually, the fire started going down, and at the bottom of it was my postbox completely burnt to the crisp. I couldn't stand up and remained on the ground in the hallway when my husband came home and ran over to me, his face completely pale. In the end, it actually became a pretty big deal, and the fire department came rushing over with firefighters and the police. When my husband found out, he was furious with his mother. The fire department and the police asked us what happened. Neither my husband nor I hid anything, and we told the police everything without missing a detail. My mother-in-law was arrested and she was put under investigation. In the beginning, she insisted that she didn't know what this was about. But after an intense questioning from the police, in the end, my mother-in-law gave in and she was arrested for arson. Lighting fire to a house when people were inside made the crime even more severe, and my mother-in-law was sentenced to prison. The life behind bars was all that was waiting for her. When my father-in-law heard about all this, he was so devastated by the shock that he couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days. And then when he finally was able to regain his composure, that incident made him terrified of his wife, and he decided to get a divorce. My husband and I talked about it, and it was an easy decision. We decided to welcome Kevin's father to live with us and to support all of his medical needs. I later found out that Kevin was practically raised by his father, who was always kind and affectionate with Kevin. However, on the other hand, his mother never showed any kind of affection towards him, nor did she do anything for him throughout his childhood. Because of that, Kevin never had any deep relationships or trust with his mother, so he wasn't particularly opposed to his mother having to spend the rest of her life alone. Kevin's father put their house up for sale, and the three of us moved into a spacious apartment together. In our new home, the three of us were able to get along really well, just like we did before. After Kevin's father moved in with us, little by little, he started to regain his energy, and it didn't take long for him to get back into a positive and kind father-in-law that I always knew. As for my mother-in-law, she sent many letters of apology from me to prison. However, I wasn't able to easily forget the fear when she nearly set the house on fire, and even though I read her letters, I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. My husband agreed with this, and we never saw her again. Once she was released from prison, Karen had nowhere to go home to, and I heard that she ended up living all on her own in an elderly home. As for the three of us, we were going to continue living happily together as a family.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.